Hmm.
Hello, Pavan. Thank you for
Hi.
gracing us with presence. And
Thank you, Bala.
yeah, and our listeners are in for a treat actually as we dive into our remarkable journey and sharing insights from your experience on design thinking and innovation, Pavan. And I really loved your book, Design Your Thinking, the mindset, tools, skill set for creative problem solving. It
Thank you.
personally resonated with me. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bala.
And as Toyota says, good thinking, good products. So I strongly believe that when we design our thinking, we can design great user experiences.
Correct.
So your book has been a remarkable contribution to the design thinking. So could you just share your inspiring journey that led you to write this book?
Sure. Thank you. So, if I really go back to the space of consulting or doing workshops and training programs on creativity, which was our original calling, it's been there for a very, very long time. And I've been doing workshops on creative problem solving, lateral thinking, innovation, uh, lean also at times. And then over a period of time, what happened was that it dovetailed into something which is slightly more serious, which is on design thinking. And then it so happened that somebody from Penguin spotted some of my work, which was basically through workshops or even articles. I've been writing quite avidly in various magazines and newspapers.
Mm.
So it caught their attention. They reached out to me saying that they want to commission a book on design thinking, which was an emerging topic then. And one thing led to another. So I sent a book proposal. They were kind enough to accept the book proposal. And in the middle of 2019 is when I got to write on this book. So it came out towards the end of 2020 at a time when we were really into the pandemic. So in a way, the pandemic also helped me in a, that I could sit down at my home and then really put all my efforts into writing this book. So that's been the journey. But my work on design thinking predates the book. And after the book came out, it has also helped me tremendously to institutionalize some of these aspects and to really make an impact beyond my workshops. So that's been the journey.
That's a fantastic journey, Pavan. And I really loved the book and the insights and how you structured the thoughts on the design thinking. So, for our listeners, maybe who might be new to the concept, could you provide a concise, um, um, brief explanation of what
Yeah,
design thinking is all about?
absolutely. So let me start off with what design thinking is not. So design thinking is not about designing because the word design looms so heavy in the phrase design thinking that people often misunderstand it as that it's about designing something. If at all, it's about designing your thinking. And that's why I chose the title of my book as Designing Your Thinking. So if I were to offer a very simple definition of design thinking, it would be solving complex problems well in a human-centric approach. That is design thinking. So one of the key qualifiers of design thinking is human centricity, which is you really try to keep the human in the center of the affair instead of trying to meet requirements of your product or process or regulatory or competition or profits. And if it means that you have to surrender rest of the things to the human being in question, so be it. So that's one piece of it. And another piece of design thinking, which is very instrumental to Indians, is discipline. So it's a very systematic and a disciplined way of problem solving. Now, I don't doubt for a moment that Indians are creative. We are very, very creative people. But where we lack is discipline. And we somehow mistrust discipline, stating that discipline will strangle creativity out of you, which is absolutely wrong. If at all you are not disciplined, then there is no meaning to your creativity because you can't really produce something out of all your spark. And the third aspect is that it really looks at complex problems, which means that think of design thinking as a sledgehammer. If you ask me that, can I use design thinking for any problem? My answer would be no. That's not required. You have other ways of problem solving, which I said before, such as lean thinking, agile, six thinking hats, scamper, lateral thinking, the whole host of techniques from Toyota production system, etc. But what distinguishes design thinking is where we really look at problems which are complex or what we call as wicked problems. Now, as an example of wicked problem would be that why people don't turn up for voting. Now, this May we had voting in Bangalore, Karnataka. And in urban Karnataka, urban Bangalore, the turnout was as low as 60%. Now, that's an absolutely educated class. They would be willing to pounce on any politician on Facebook, Twitter, or other social medias. But when it came to really casting their vote, they were missing. Now, that is a problem that can be very well solved with design thinking because it has an element of emotions. It is a non-linear problem. It has a lot of moving parts to it. And that's a kind of wicked problem that really fits the bill for design thinking. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, it's a really great insight because normally people use the design thinking for all the aspects and they try to solve. Definitely, I guess design thinking will be helpful to solve the problems, but we have to make sure that where we can apply and how we can benefit it from that. That's a really great
Yeah.
thought, Pavan. And of course, the discipline. So discipline, it's a great virtue, I guess. That gives a lot of freedom and focusing on the process will take care. That's a fantastic insight. And so maybe maybe if we delve deeper into our discussion, could you just walk us through the key tenets that underpin this transformative approach for the problem solving and innovation?
Yeah. So there are a bunch of tenets which I talk about in my book as well. But in this short discussion, I would try to bring about three which are very critical. The first tenet is that it is not about designing, it is about thinking. So the slant is not on designing because people often get deluded saying that at the end of this, I should have a physical contraption or I should have something which is working or a physical manifestation. Not necessary. What we are trying to do is to see, are you able to think differently about the problem space? That's the first thing. So it's not about designing, it's about thinking. The second tenet is that you have to think with your hands. Now, we have been guilty of thinking with our lips. It's often a saying that if there are three Indians talking, you can have four opinions amongst them.
Yeah.
So we are very sort of more verbal in terms of our ideation. We don't really write our ideas down, let alone draw the ideas. So if I were to look at a brainstorming session happening in a corporate, they'll keep talking, augmenting each other's ideas, nullifying each other's ideas, defending their personal ideas. But there is hardly anybody taking down notes. And then when I say think with your hands, what I'm trying to suggest is just don't write down the ideas, but do something about those ideas. Try to give them some sort of a physical shape. You can use some low cost prototyping materials such as clay, Lego blocks, post-it notes, doodling, sketching, and all of that. So that's another very critical aspect of design. And the third one, which I would like to offer to you, is that here we try to really put a lot of impetus on empathy. I'm not using the word customer centricity. I'm using the word human centricity.
Yeah.
Because when I say customer centricity, it often comes at the cost of other stakeholders, predominantly your employees. So we say that keep the customers happy. And even if it results into stress from employees, I'm okay to take that cost. No, human centricity means that we have to really throw the processes, the routines, the methods out and pay attention to humans and then redesign the entire thing around the humans' evolving needs. So we say that don't focus on the object, rather focus on the subject. What the product is not so important as against how it is used. And we have so many examples of failed innovations and failed technological advancements just because they have not been able to keep pace with what humans can accept. which is to say that the rate at which technology is evolving is far higher than the rate at which humans can make sense out of that. So now you can have quantum computing, but if you and me do not know how to put quantum computing to use, it is too much for us. And that's where design thinking really bridges the gap between what technology can possibly do and what humans can make sense out of. So these are the few tenets of design thinking.
These are wonderful tenets. And I also remember one thing, great insight from your book, like build to think. That's really great thought because, and also you mentioned that thinking by hands. That's great thing. Pawan. So could you just tell about what about this build to think? Because normally in our agile way of working, we mean like learning by doing. That's empirical way of doing the things. Could you just share more insights on build to
Yeah,
think?
absolutely. So before that, I would like to um, call out one of the misconceptions people have about agile, since many of the audience for this discussion would be from the agile fraternity. Now, what people have mistaken agile for is speed, right?
Yeah.
So they think that agile is about thinking fast and doing fast. What I would like to caution is that agile is not about thinking fast. Agile is only about doing fast. On the contrary, you should be thinking extremely slow. Because when you're thinking fast, frankly speaking, you are not even thinking. You're just going through the motions. And as a result, what happens is, and I have been witness to a lot of agile projects that did not live up to their expectation because people have been rushing through it all through. So instead of trying to give a very high premium on speed, you need to give a very high premium on rate of learning, not rate of doing, rate of learning. Now, how do you distinguish between rate of doing versus rate of learning? Now, suppose you're doing the same thing over and over again. No doubt your rate of doing is extremely fast, but your rate of learning is almost zero. However, what we advocate in design thinking is to think slow. When I'm thinking slow, I'm not only thinking deep, but I'm also thinking into the future, which means that in the process of solving one problem, I don't inadvertently end up creating another. So because agile is broken into sprints, which are further run often sequentially or in parallel, somewhere down the line, you miss out on the big picture. That what am I supposed to achieve by all of this? No doubt I'm putting the pieces together. I'm doing a fantastic job in terms of keeping up with my schedule. But is the overall big picture coming up clearly or not? And hence, by slowing it down at the beginning, because slow is steady and steady is fast. That's the way one has to look at it. So slow down, put the handbrakes, slow down the entire process, look at the corner cases, look at the big picture, go deep, 2 levels, 3 levels, go into the future, and then conjure up what's the right action plan. Once you have identified the right set of ideas, then agile comes into the play. Till such time, you should not be going the agile. You should rather be going the docile way, which is about really going slow and deep. Now, building is, as I said, thinking with your hands, building. But then, once again, imagine what would be building of a solution mean in the case of motivating people to cast their vote. Now, coming May 2024, we have the general elections coming up. And I'll not be surprised if the state of affair remains pretty much the same in Bangalore. Again, people choosing to go to Nandi Hill or outskirts of Bangalore instead of going to the polling booth. And these are educated people, minded. And so how do we address that problem? Now, building a solution to that problem is a non-trivial affair because you can't do a prototype because election happens one day throughout the country. You can't run a prototype there. And that is where you'll be very, very clever in terms of what solutions you have. How do you generate those solutions? How do you prototype those solutions? So agile has no meaning to that kind of a problem because I exactly know that the total amount which I have to run the solution is from morning, say 8 a.m. till evening 5:30 p.m. That's about it. I don't have any more time. So that is where you need to be very creative, not only in terms of the ideas, but also creative in terms of how do we test those ideas. That is how we look at.
These insights are really truly enlightening, Pavan. And of course, Agile is not about speed of thinking. It's about slow thinking and also um, validating our assumptions by delivering quickly to the customers.
Yeah.
And so when we consider that broader landscape of problem solving, particularly like with the realm of design thinking, so how would you emphasize the importance of systems thinking here?
Yeah, absolutely. So design thinking has borrowed a lot from systems thinking. Now, systems thinking is to really look at the interrelationship between various components of the system. And when we fail to do systems thinking, we create problems for the future in the pursuit of solving one problem. So, the classic case that we have of a failure of systems thinking is the global climate crisis. The climate crisis is staring at us because we try to optimize economic growth in certain parts of the world without really understanding that while the boundary of your economics could well be your country, but the boundary of climate change is definitely not your country. A few centigrades going up in the Antarctica can pretty much drown Mumbai, even if Mumbai is the financial capital of India. So that is where systems thinking is extremely, extremely critical from a problem solving perspective, especially if you're solving a wicked problem. A wicked problem is one where you have multiple moving parts and the interconnection between the various parts is ambiguous, what we call as causal ambiguity. So design thinking is really very front loaded technique. What I mean by front loading of a technique is that it puts a very high premium on discovering the problem. Because the misunderstanding that we often have is that I know the problem, all I need to do is to solve it. But if you really take a step back and question yourself, do you really know the problem? Or you're just aware of the symptom? So, for example, people not casting vote is only a symptom which is manifested. The problem could be multifaceted. The problem could be a sheer apathy towards unavailability of time, towards not having the name on the voter list, towards not knowing where the polling booth is, not making up mind which candidate to vote for, not being aware of who are the candidates standing from your constituency. All of these are the problems. And if I peel the onion further, each of the problem can then have some root causes. For example, the drive to get voter ID is not done properly, or it's not well connected to your Aadhaar and other credentials, etc. So systems thinking talks about that you go two levels above your problem space and try to understand that if I solve this particular problem, what happens next? Am I solving a bigger problem or I'm just grappling with a symptom? At the same time, it also necessitates you to go two level below and try to understand the microcosm of where this so-called symptom is emerging from. And that's where systems thinking is the cornerstone of design thinking. And I'm glad you brought this thing up because often people lose out on the big picture. My concern is not so much about solving a problem. My concern is about solving the problem. Solving the problem means you solve a big ticket item, which is an absolutely instrumental piece rather than solving a problem, which is just sort of getting created in another manifestation down the line. So that's my view on this topic.
Yeah, seeing the bigger picture, and we will feel that a part of the problem space when we understand the bigger picture. And we have to do um, discover at the same time, deliver to the end user, and also get it validated so that we can get the feedback and refine our process. Of course, understanding about the interconnection and interactions between the components always helps to create more insights about that.
Indeed, indeed.
As we aim to create some environments that encourage innovation, are there any strategies or approaches can organization adopt to cultivate that culture so that we can embrace
Yeah.
and nurture innovative thinking?
Absolutely. Um, Minus the culture, these sparks have no chance. A seed is only as good as the soil in which it is sown. So we need to also ensure that the soil is receptive enough of the incoming seed. So, three tips which I would like to offer to you. The first one is what we call a psychological safety, and this is to do with the leadership style. Often leaders fall for the trap that they think that I am personally responsible to come up with creative ideas, or I'm responsible to drive the innovation program. Not necessary. It's okay if the leader does not have the smartest idea in the room. But if the leader is killing smart ideas, that's not okay. So by providing air cover to the people who are in your team, you are indeed becoming a leader which is fostering an innovation culture. So that's the first aspect of it, which is psychological safety. To your team, at your family, in your office, wherever, you should give a feeling to your employees that you will never be reprimanded for coming up with a crazy idea, as long as it is in an honest pursuit. And we should not confuse a crazy idea with absolute stupidity. So that's not admissible. The second piece is diversity. Now, the fault line diversity that we see in the organizations is gender. And even today, I don't see diversity to be truly there in most companies outside of the, say, IT or tech industry. Even now, we see a very skewed workforce in manufacturing, in many services industries as well. So, diversity not only in terms of gender, but also in terms of ethnicity, in terms of work experience, in terms of generational education qualification, etc. Because when you have diversity, then you get a different perspectives, then you get more tolerance, and people from two different socioeconomic backgrounds can look at the problem in two very, very different ways. And as a result, you can come up with more ideas. The second part of it. And the third part is budget. The challenge that happens is if you start measuring all activities in an office using the same yardstick. So what has served very well from a productivity standpoint, if you try to apply that to a creativity standpoint, then obviously it fails. So the 8 hours shift or 8 hours a day of work, that is good if the person exactly know what the work is. So this is the vestigial of the industrial revolution. But in the creativity revolution, 8 hours of day has no meaning because a person can actually come up with a wacky idea while driving back home, listening to a podcast on the way. And throughout the day, he or she may not have come up across any idea. Now, how do you measure that productivity? Because the creativity is actually happening outside the office hours. So, if you can allow people with umpteen resources to start experimenting, give shape to their ideas, take some excursions which are not necessarily very fertile in the short run, I think we can really create a very useful environment for creativity. And then design thinking has a chance. Till such time, it is just a concept.
Yeah, these, I guess, the three tips are really helpful because the psychological safety, budgeting, and diversity are really, I guess those are all like systemic conditions needed for innovation to thrive, I think. And I think these are all great insights. Maybe could you just share any success story or any example of any organization that successfully transformed its culture to become a hub of innovation?
Yeah, so I think one company which I've been observing for a very long time now, which has been doing a serious amount of innovation, is Titan. Now, I've been watching this company since I was a management trainee there in the year 2005. So it's been almost like 18 years now. And the company, from a very humble watch manufacturing to getting into jewelry, eyewear, accessories, now into saris, etc., has really stood strong in terms of its philosophy of being entrepreneurial, taking ideas, bringing those ideas to life, giving people freedom to experiment, to fail. The company had its own share of failures. But two things that really stand out about the company is the first is stability at the leadership team. If you do your bit of reading, then you would be astonished to know that Titan hasn't had a very, very high attrition rate. Even now, their attrition rate is in the lower single digits, which means that they have been able to really hold people for long periods of time. allow them to grow organically to higher posts. And that has a huge impact on innovation. And also, if you look at their choice of infrastructure, so one of the most amazing campuses of any Indian company which I've been to is that of Titan. It's called the Integrity Campus, which is in Electronic City. And I talk about this in my book as well, that how the office environment can have a huge bearing on the way people interact with each other, the way creative ideas flow, etc. And that's something which is getting a real hit when people are working from home. Because when people work from home, be rest assured that they will have very high productivity because they can cut down on all the distractions, etc. But they'll have very low creativity because creativity is mostly about serendipity. So you can work from home if you know exactly what the work is. But if you do not know what the work is, the same home can really sort of insulate you and sort of make you less productive. So Titan is one company which I've seen being consistently at the top of the game. And of course, there are a lot of other things which they have done in terms of the innovation programs, training people on creativity, etc. So I think that's one company which I would hold in very high regards amongst Indian firms.
It is very encouraging to listen the success story of Indian company, and it evoked a couple of thoughts in my mind. One thing is like always innovation. Um, with respect to Indian companies, people are always focusing on improvisation or jugaad. So,
Yeah.
do you suggest any tips, or maybe what is maybe you can share your observations about how the innovation in India, how we can how they can develop an innovative mindset.
I think improvisation is not necessarily Indian. It's a human tendency. Anywhere in the world, we have to improvise. So when the astronauts were on board Apollo 13 and they had emergency that they were out of breathable oxygen, they had to improvise. But they did not stop with improvisation. Once the Apollo 13 mission got over, they really took a lot of learning from that mission and corroborated that with what went wrong, etc. And today they have one of the most successful space programs in the world, NASA, right? So I'm okay with improvisation as long as that is not an end in itself. If I'm trying to do something for the very first time, obviously I will improvise. So, for example, for the mission to Mars, Mangalyaan, we improvised because we had to launch a satellite on a PSLV, which is not capable of putting satellites to Martian orbits. Maximum it can do is to lunar orbit. So we took 5 laps of Earth orbit to develop enough speed to jettison the satellite into, put the satellite into that relevant orbit. Now that is improvisation. But this improvisation was not done on the fly. It was very well thought through. So in all aspects of life, you need to improvise, but don't stop at it. Try to understand what went right, what went wrong, and try to make systems which are robust enough. So you can start with improvisation, be reasonably selective in terms of picking up things that work, and but you should always have a very solid system that should not uh, leave much of improvisation to be done. So that is how I would look at it. So it's nothing Indian. We have been glorifying improvisation for a very long time now. I think it's about the time that we stop doing it and we really seriously look at how do we make systems which are much more reliable than improvisation.
And that's so encouraging. And what about what do you say like the current trends in innovation in India?
As I said, in India, we have three types of innovative firms. One is startup, second is enterprise, and third is government. And I have had the virtue of working with all three setups. If I look at HAL, ISRO, ONGC, DRDO, no doubt they are highly innovative. Except we don't talk so much about these, but they're extremely innovative organizations, extremely, and that too at a very shoestring budget. Because ISRO has really proven its mark, but even HAL, NAL, DRDO, ONGC, etc., they've done phenomenal. AIMS, for example, has done phenomenally well. So that's one genre. The second genre is the startup. Startup is a very noisy environment. A lot of startups will die before a few will survive. And we have to surrender to that Darwinian logic, which is right. And we can't be emotional about the whole affair. And what the startup is doing is it is trying to reduce the threshold of innovation, reducing the threshold of risk taking. So now much more and more people are going out. Customers have a lot many options, and it's a very thriving environment because ultimately it's the customer who decides whether something is innovative or not. So that's the second thing. And the third is because the large enterprises are losing their talent to startups. They are meeting startups in the market and losing even business to startups. They are also feeling the heat. So the large companies such as the automobile industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the services space, and Titan is what I spoke to you about, which is this category, are also beefing up. So I think India has a very balanced view on innovation, and which is extremely encouraging as of now.
Wonderful. And these are great insights, Pavan. And of course, design thinking is about this desirability, feasibility, and viability. But normally, when we go for like scaling and impact, so how we can manage or how we can thrive when we want to scale our products? Are there any suggestions or tips from your side?
Yeah, it's a good question. I always believe that scale is the real proof of innovation. If you're not scaling, you are only being creative. The difference between creativity and innovation is this. If I'm a songwriter and I compose one song and I stop at it, then it simply means I got lucky. But if I were to make a factory of songs and I can come up with a song after another song after another song, then it means that I have really cracked the code of putting it into the marketplace. And that is innovation. Now, scale does not have to be a linear scale. It can even be economies of scope. So, for example, if you ask me that I'm running a company called Inflection Point, and how many people do I have? I would say it's just me. And I have no plans of expanding my team because I don't want 100 people like me. The way I would like to scale is by collaborating with you, by writing a book, by doing my videos, by doing workshops, etc. That is the way I look at scaling, which is the economies of scope. But nonetheless, if I am a one trick pony, then I'm just being creative or lucky. So what we need to understand is that scale has to be achieved. There is no excuse. How much is up to one's appetite? Because if you scale tremendously, then you are inviting unnecessary amount of competition to the game, which is certainly not very useful. And in my book, in the later chapters, I guess chapter 7 or 8, I talk about scaling and where I say that how do you scale? And I think that's one of my contributions to the literature of design thinking because design thinking historically, whether it is from IDEO or Stanford, hasn't really put much attention on scaling. They leave a lot of tested ideas onto the plate and then it's up to the audience to do something about it. But I guess unless you put a premium on scaling, these ideas have no value. So that is where the real proof of innovation is scale. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, because many organizations, scaling is the greatest challenge, right? They are not able to scale maybe with respect to the teams or maybe the products. So that's what I guess scaling we have to take care. There are many common anti-patterns or pitfalls there. Design thinking. Maybe from your observations, any anti-patterns you see so that how we can overcome those anti-patterns. Any antidotes for those anti-patterns?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think three traps, and since I'm out of time now, but I'll just leave you with three traps. The first trap that people often fall into is that they think of design thinking as design, or that it is for designers or technologists or startups or the small companies, which is not true. And the reason I took the very example of election and voting is to bring home the point that design thinking can be applicable to as non-technical stuff as voting could be. So that's the first trap that people fall. The second thing that they should be aware of is that the importance and the premium that we must give to trial. We Indians are not very good at it. If it is about getting our hands dirty, trying to experiment, appetite to fail is not something which is very Indian. We would like to be right first time, but design thinking is not about being right first time. If at all, it is about being wrong first time, being wrong second time, maybe being wrong third time. And maybe the fourth time around, you are really right. But that is not something that we are okay with. So the second piece. And the third piece is diversity. If given a choice, I still see in schools and colleges, people form groups. People who are Malayalis, they'll sit with Malayalis. People who are Tamilians, they'll sit and eat with Tamil. People who are North Indians, they'll sit and eat with. And over a period of time, you are just creating another cocoon, and your thoughts, your ideas are very parochial as a result. And the same tendencies I see even in corporates. And that's where creativity really suffers. So if you can embrace creativity and diversity in the truest sense, I think we have more diversity than possibly any continent in the world. And if you can bring it to bearing, I think we have a very bright future.
Yeah. So considering the time, yeah. So and yeah, of course, diversity plays crucial role here. And how do you see the integration of generative AI in the landscape of design thinking? Any quick thoughts?
Yeah, it's an interesting question again. I think one need not fear generative AI. It has to be a good complement to what we are trying to do, because nothing can substitute human creativity. Now, the way uh, the Google Maps has not taken drivers away, but even now, even with Google Maps and everything else that we have, we still need drivers. So I'm okay to use a Google Map if I want to go from point A to point B. But if tomorrow I'm going to Lucknow and I have about 5 hours in Lucknow, and I want to know which are the top 2, 3 places which I can visit in Lucknow in the next 5 hours, I don't think Google Map is going to help. I need a taxi driver who knows the city inside out and whom I can trust, and I'm willing to pay a premium. So what technology does is that it not only democratizes a lot of participation from people, and as a result, we have far more number of cab drivers, far more number of delivery agents at Swiggy, Zomato, etc. But it now sort of elevates the threshold of what it is to be a good driver, what it is to be a good merchant, what it is to be a good salesman. So it really separates the men from the boys. And that is what is happening in the space of creativity. Now, I don't think cameras took away the importance of artists. The same debate would have happened 100 years back, stating that now that we have cameras, who would need to buy art? But now, what has happened to art? Art has become a premium. Similarly, what is going to happen with generative AI is that it is not going to reduce the importance of creativity. If at all, it is going to increase the importance of creativity, and it will take away the people who are not genuinely creative. So we will have a huge masses of people who will be using artificial intelligence and technology in general to make a living. But then you will have a premium class of people who are genuinely um, sharpening their axe on that particular art form and who are really calling the shots. So it's going to be a big segregation of machine like people and more Homo sapiens, is how I would look at it.
Yeah, that will just tell about the essence of humanity. Also, we have to, I guess, partnering with the technology and serving the
Yeah.
people. That's a thing. And any characteristics you say that can define a design thinker?
I think the person has to be an experimentalist.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to really experiment in all aspects of life. And it doesn't have to be an experiment in your professional life alone. It has to be an experiment in all realms of life. So if you're an experimentalist and you're not hung up to what has worked in past, you are a design thinker.
Great. And any favorite quote or book from your side, Pavan, you want to?
I like Eckhart Tolle.
Okay.
I think he keeps me spiritually anchored. So A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle is something that I would strongly recommend.
Wow, I really love his books, The Power of Now, and a lot of he talks about awakenings and the presence. It's a great book. Any quote from Eckhart Tolle?
I'm not going to paraphrase, but he roughly said, and this translates into that whatever has happened in past cannot stop you from being present now.
Yeah,
So if you choose to be present at this moment, your past cannot hold you back. You can be present at this. So that's a very powerful thought.
great. And be here now. That's
Yes.
that's a present. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So as we come to the end of this enriching conversation, so I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to you, Pavan, for
Thank you.
gracing us with your insights and expertise today. Thank you so much for sharing
Thank you.
your
Thanks, Paula.
insights.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.